at night. So part of that process is reaching out and finding retired superintendents, talking to them, and then when you feel like you have a viable candidate, you bring the person before the board to kind of talk, and then you would have a formal vote on that. So Michael Bauman was a candidate that I contacted and have met with and talked with, and I thought would be someone to bring forth to the board to talk through and have some discussion about. I think just for the purpose of keeping our focus where it needs to be, I kind of want to start the discussion with the board and ask the board to kind of talk through what do you see as important for that interim process? Like, what do you think the district's needs are? What would you like to see an interim person address? Or how you want some things in place for that. Keep in mind that that interim process is very short-term because we're going to be looking at hiring a new superintendent, so long-term goals would be more for the next superintendent that the board would hire. So just kind of opening the discussion that way. What would you like to see from a candidate in this interim process?
What is short-term?
Well, depending on when we can get someone hired and when they could start.
I know, but for how long? What's the short term?
Well, I think the hope is that we can hire someone to start by July 1st.
Yeah, so from last week's MSBA presentation, the person that came in, what was her name?
Barb Dorn.
She made a comment that said, hey, it's important that the board members make a choice and make the right choice and not settle for a second choice. And so however long that process takes for incoming board members to weigh in on that decision is reasonable. And so I would assume a lot of good candidates that may still be out there already are in a superintendent or in executive services capacity, and their role probably won't expire until end of June of next year. So one can logically maybe come to a conclusion that an interim capacity would be at least until June for any new candidate that comes in, and then hopefully by then, during the process, if able to identify someone to make that transition. If not, then I would assume that we'd want to probably continue on the interim capacity until all the board members are aligned with the next superintendent. So that'd be my point of view. Am I mistaken? Am I off? Or
No, I mean, that's the process. You said short term, and I was just curious what that meant.
okay. Anything else? I got some comments. I mean, the interim process. All right, so the interim process. Let me rephrase that. Not the interim process. But what I'm looking for
the district.
A lot has happened in the past year and a half, or a year and 8 months, from budget cuts to boundary changes to levies to XYZ, and part of that, in my mind, my observation is that there has been maybe a lack of execution on a robust change management plan for those key transactional events. I think from a board's point of view, from my point of view, I wish I would have more transparency, more of a roadmap of these key decisions that need to be made, key input from the board members, as we are to provide the direction and the guidance while the administration and the school district implement. I believe that change management is a huge piece that I would look to in the next superintendent for that transparency. And because of all the swirl and because of all the experiences that we went through, a lot of reestablishing or rebuilding of relationships between the various partners and stakeholders within our community, that has to be a huge plus. Now, we want to be mindful that, again, this is an interim superintendent, and so I don't know how much you can expect out of a superintendent in that capacity, because as we go through the permanent search, there's going to be other variables. But for now, in my mind, building that relationship, having that transparency, and a good, robust change management plan for our operations that we still have to do for the next 9 months. We still have a levy, we may have a bond, we have negotiations. These are still big transactional events, and can we do it differently this time around? So those are my thoughts.
I'm just thinking about this in the couple minutes we've been sitting here, so I apologize if my thoughts aren't really comprehensive, but, you know, I agree. One of the things that's really important to me is it feels like over the past couple of years, there has been a lot of transition in terms of thinking about things at a higher systems level perspective. And so something that's really important to me is that we have someone come in to maintain that direction, that really there has been, I think in the various departments, efforts to really, for instance, try to make sure that different buildings are kind of following different processes and procedures, and those are things that I think are hard change. So to speak to kind of change management, do we have a leader who can come in and continue to push that work forward, and also be someone that the staff and community and the board can get behind in terms of just having that trust and going, because I think one of the most important things with change management is having a leader in place who people can help, or that person can help everyone see the vision that they're trying to create in our district. And so I do think that's important to move forward. I think we came in at a very difficult time, and I knew that when I was campaigning for this seat. And I would like to continue our forward progress on financials. That's really important for me as well, that we maintain and continue to replenish our general fund. Also, we need someone who can come in and be a champion for us in terms of our levy and bond. Well, levy for sure, that's on the ballot this fall, and also probably, hopefully, a bond for spring. And so thinking about someone who has success with that, is able to lead our community through that, and someone who can come in and be that champion right away. I also, you know, something we had talked about last week is a choice you make in this situation of hiring someone who's retired versus considering someone internal. And I want to make sure that our process is, our search process for a new superintendent is as robust as possible. And for me, that means looking to someone who's retired so that it's clear that we're doing a robust search when it comes time.
Right.
Well, I'm pretty retired, just so you know.
I do know that.
Check that block off.
Right. Well, for those that weren't at that training, one of the things that MSBA discussed with us is if you have a retired superintendent as your interim, then when you actually going through the superintendent process, it's easier to get candidates that are interested in the district because they know the person that's in the interim role isn't interested in being this next superintendent. So a lot of times that helps with that process. So that's what
Yes.
Carly's speaking to.
Sorry, I should have provided that.
That's okay.
I got one more.
At the same time, I think that is a favorable thing for us to have, because an internal person knows the board, knows all the nuances, has been engaged in what we're doing, and can pick up without missing a beat. And I also believe it gives a stretch opportunity for themselves and others within the district to help fill the void and backfill positions and tasks. And I think it gives them an opportunity to do that. So I think there's more of an upside to somebody internal than not. So I think that, I don't know, that was worthy of a discussion. I didn't know if that discussion had been had since the meeting went forward and I wasn't here. But
For a permanent person?
No, for
For
an
an
interim person, and stuff. So, and I think from the budget impact too, I think that makes a difference from a budget impact as well. And so, because that's my concern, and I'm very about the process. And for whatever reason, I know we're here tonight talking about this. We had a meeting last week. We're here tonight talking about this, and we're voting at something tomorrow. And that's just not a normal process that this district goes through when we want community engagement and feedback and involvement. With the last superintendent searches that we've had a high level of community engagement in whether it's an interim or whether it's the superintendent. With Dr. Van Zyl, we had the highest level of engagement that we've had in the process, so from community and staff. And so I I'm concerned that we're talking tonight about this and voting on it tomorrow with no community engagement and no feedback. And as you can see, we're starting to get some emails now about this. And so I think we have to be very conscientious about what we're doing here, because the process is very important if you don't want to alienate people. And I think that's exactly what this process is doing right now. And so anybody that we bring, whether it's external or internal, we're putting them in a bad position because we haven't fared this out with timely feedback for our community to share with us and our staff. So that'd be a concern, knowing that whoever is sitting in that seat, interim, is going to have to deal with all the feedback after they're here instead of knowing what they're walking into.
Is
I
that
think-
certain that
Yeah.
we're voting on it tomorrow?
Well, I mean, we could put it to a vote and the board can decide
It's
to
on the
table it
agenda.
until later.
Let's put it this way, it's
It
on
is-
the agenda.
It is on the agenda.
So they have
So last
24
week-
hours to respond to us.
So last week, we had the MSBA person come in, and I think all the things that you've shared definitely make sense, especially as we find a permanent superintendent. One of the things that, when you're looking for an interim superintendent, it's one of those where we may not need to
It's a less
spend
informal
4 to 6
process.
months
Yeah.
trying to find an interim superintendent for the short duration that we have. Do you recall, I believe MSBA suggested for, I don't know what the process is, what was their recommendation on the interim process?
For what they shared with me, it's an informal process because when you are talking about retired superintendents, they're not vying for the job, so they don't want this situation where, it's contentious or, you're fighting against someone else for it. So as that process was shared, it's more informal. What they say is they provide some retired superintendents' phone numbers. The chair calls when you feel like you have a viable candidate. You bring it before the board, and then the board meets the person and then has an opportunity to vote or talk about that person. Given the current time frame that we have, I hear what you're saying, Judy. I think for the superintendent, when we're looking for the actual person that we're going to, hire for an extended period of time, that, we want a process that's got community involvement, that has, some time behind it. With the time frame that we have right now, I think that would be difficult. As far as considering internal candidates, we don't have a whole lot of people within the district with a superintendent's license. One of the things I know people have asked about just promoting our current assistant superintendent to superintendent, but we also have to take into account the stress that we're putting on her from running dual roles with the training that she has for the READ Act, with a levy, with a bond, with a new math curriculum that needs implemented, and Emily is the head of teaching and learning.
Would
So
that be a decision for her to make and the
I-
organization to
yep.
make, not us?
I spoke with her about
So-
it.
You've been here for
We did
27
speak to
years.
her.
Have we ever hired a interim
Yes.
superintendent?
Yes,
And what was those processes like?
it was discussion with the board on who it should be, if it should be a retired superintendent, if it should be internal. We've done it a few times, so but the process
Who were
always
they?
the same, and
Did you do stakeholder feedback too? Like the
well,
process that you
our
recommended?
process that we do for any votes is we announce things in a work session or board meeting. We wait 2 weeks and then before we vote on it, so they can provide feedback. So that's what we do that's what our process has always been, whether it's policy, superintendent.
But is that what you
it's
did,
pretty-
what you just shared, is that what you did with the previous superintendent hires that you said that you had?
Yes.
For interim.
Yeah.
For the interim?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, and stuff, so because it's just, to me, it's always making sure that our community is aware and the staff are aware of what's happening as much as what's happening and when, and if they have any thoughts or feedback to share, then we
So
can hear
in
from
this
them.
circumstance, we would call like an emergency session for a vote, since we have tomorrow as our regular board meeting, and then we don't vote in work sessions, so we would call an
We would,
emergency session.
if we wanted to table it to a later time, we could do that. That's a board decision.
But just remember, it's a holiday, to the next week.
I'd like to add one more thing if I forgot. I think you're right with the systems process that you shared earlier, because there were good, from my understanding, good initiatives in place where an elementary school is the same as another elementary school and so forth, and having those consistency with the amenities and the service offerings within each building makes sense. I would say that, in my profession, we have significant leadership changes that happen quite often. And with those org changes, there's a lot of ambiguity with staff, and they don't know which way am I supposed to go. What is the deadline? What are the initiatives? Are the initiatives still the same, X, Y, Z? And so I think that the interim superintendent, and while while it's not a permanent role, accountability is a huge factor, because I know that there are instances where there are a lot of business units or staff where, hey, the leader's not here, or we've got a new leader, they're going to be gone. We need to make sure that the next individual has the support of the board to make sure that the accountability of staff, of principals, of whoever may be, are still executing on the day-to-day operations. Assume they already are, but obviously I'm not in the weeds of what a superintendent does with the administration and the district and staff, but I can share again from my point of view on the business side. You've got various departments with leadership changes. Sometimes not as much can get developed, or not as much can get through, and things get delayed at times. So
Well, and I think
we
that
need to hold people accountable.
And I think that accountability goes to this board too. As we saw in the most recent survey, the superintendent favorability was increasing, ours was decreasing. So if you're talking about going out and building trust and developing relationships and improving relationships, that's us that has to do that as much as the superintendent, especially when we have a levy referendum out there. We can't have a levy referendum looking for support for our students and teachers with board member favorability declining, and that's exactly where we're at. So we have to figure out how we are going to bring this up, and instead of trying to be on one side or another and fighting, our board members are to be bridging the gap between the partnership we have with the superintendent and our community. And that's one thing that we've been very challenged as a board doing, is bridging the gap. We've picked sides. So if we want anybody, whether it's an internal, external candidate in an interim role or the future superintendent, we have to learn how to partner with them and bridge that gap between the community and the staff and the administration.
Dave, Terry?
I was just gonna say, I certainly see many opportunities for improving our processes, both as we face a levy and as we bring 3 new board members on, so.
Yep.
I
Oh,
agree.
we should have a good onboarding plan for these board members. So
Here's the thing, Michael was not perfect, but he was always respectful, and I worked well with him. And so I just want stability for the next, 10 months, whatever it takes, while you guys find a new person and do it right. So that's my reasoning.
Terry? Haven't heard from you.
I kind of agree with a lot of the things that Carly said. But I think there's one area that the superintendent's gonna have to really deal with, and that is.
Interim or super? The interim superintendent?
Interim superintendent needs to deal with is the fact that we've got 3 board members with 2 years' experience, and then we have 3 board members with no experience. And I think that's a challenge.
Mhm.
I think the current board is a challenge. And I think that the superintendent is gonna have to deal with that. That's gonna be an issue.
yeah, but I
Maybe
think the
not an
current
issue, it's
board-
gonna be a challenge. It's gonna be a challenge, not an issue.
I think the current board had challenges. Yep, and I think with new board members.
Those challenges are
maybe
gonna go away,
challenges-
right?
Yeah.
Yep,
And-
those challenges will go away.
And I think with a collaborative spirit and partnership, I think that's just expected in someone in this kind of profession, so.
I hope you're right.
Well, I think, we have had challenges as a board, but we've also been dealt very challenging situations. And I think what we have to be mindful of is that, when I hire a team, I'm hiring people that I know, I'm looking for certain skills, I'm looking for personalities that work with the team. We're elected individuals. The community elects us. And I think that the diversity that we have on our board speaks to, what the community thought that they needed at the time. So all of those people, we were chosen by random community members, right? Like the community voted us in. It wasn't like we could sit here and pick everybody that's on our team. So we have to learn as a board how to work together. And I feel like that we've made a lot of progress on that. Like I said, I know that it was difficult as we started out, but I do feel like there's progress that's been made, and I feel like we'll continue to make progress as we have new board members join us. Anything else? Anybody else want to add on what we're looking for? Like, I agree with the relationships. I think one thing that I'm looking for is also, maintaining the progress that we've made, so that consistency in that direction. Forward progress on financials, Carly, I think you're right on. I want to see that unassigned fund balance go back, continue to rise. The accountability. Then I also think about I think it's really important right now, given the specific area that we're in, that long-term plan on building. Like, we have a lease that's going to be up on our district office. We have middle schools that are going to be reaching capacity soon. We have a new elementary school that just opened. We have an early childhood center that's at capacity. So we just have a lot of things going on within the district. And so I think we need to take a second look at that long-term plan and just kind of make sure that we're on track for what we want to do. That's one of the things that's just been weighing pretty heavily on my mind. Do you want to open it up for some questions to Michael? Does anyone have things they would like to ask?
I think we should ask Michael what he's thinking about after listening to us.
Yeah,
He's still
I like
sitting
that.
Put it back in his lap.
Boy, there's a lot there. I'm not sure what I'm being asked. I'll frame what I think, and go from there. There's no question that process matters. And in public education, process, if you do the right processes, the majority of things will go well. If you don't, they will not. And there's a relationship that superintendents have to have with boards. Lakeville wasn't my first school district. And being a superintendent was not my objective in my professional life in public education. But for whatever reasons, and we won't go into all that story, that's where things landed. And I live in this community. I moved in this community in 2005. Had a home built by D.R. Horton over on the northeast side of Lakeville. And when I had an opportunity to leave St. Paul and come here, it was a blessing because it's in my community. I care very, very deeply about Lakeville schools. I think anybody out there who's spent any time in their professional lives trying to build something want that to be successful. I happen to have a career in the military where change is endemic. It's institutional. And we had a mantra, and the mantra was, leave things better than you found them. And then help the next individual who succeeds you to take it to the next level, and so on and so on. And that's what has always been in my heart. I feel like whatever's going on, in the depth of what's going on, I'm concerned. I don't have any other way to say it. Our kids need leadership that is an example for them to follow. And that's everybody sitting at this table, including me. And I feel very strongly that we got to get focused back on the key elements of education. Education, academics, however you want to frame that. My interest is, in my wildest nightmare or dream, I did not expect to get asked to consider this. I truly did not. And it's been a very spiritual journey for me since Thursday afternoon. And I care about everybody in this room. I care about our kids so desperately. So if I can help, I want to help. Do I want to, is every community member out there going to be behind me? I'm sure not. because you can start the word superintendent, and after that, there's all kinds of adjectives that can be used, and some of them are not kind. But I just want to help if I can, I guess is what I would say out loud. If the interim opportunity is something that you all can agree on, then, you know, I'm stepping forward and saying I can adjust my retirement. Is so beautiful. But I believe in teams. I believe in building teams. I believe, and people can say whatever they like to say, I believe we've built a good, strong team. I was on a good team, I think, when I was offered an opportunity to be the business director here. And I think I was able to continue that and grow that as a superintendent. And all I'd want to do is whatever is necessary to set conditions so that the district can move beyond where it's at and get on a positive trajectory to improve the situation overall. And all the reasons of whatever may be going on or what has happened. One thing I do know, there's 3 things you have to do in education if you're going to be in this business. And those 3 things are relationships, the second thing is relationships, and the third thing is relationships. And that's it. And you got to be really good about that. And you got to care about what's going on around you and situation awareness for everybody. Leaders everywhere, from top to bottom, have to have situation awareness of what's going on, because that's where frustration sets in. Things are going on, changes are happening, and nobody knows what's going on. And, you know, that starts with the superintendent, for sure, because it goes to the board, it goes to the community, it goes to the staff, it goes to the kids out there every day. And you got to be out there with them in the classroom, at the football games, at the baseball games, at the dance, at the whatever. You got to be there. And you got to listen to people who are going to be critical of you. And, you know, listen to what they have to say and find out the essence of the complaint and keep the personal stuff, you know, where it needs to be. But people personalize things a lot. I get that. But I just want to say, if I can help, I'll help. If I'm an inhibitor or there's lots of community pushback because, you know, he was knucklehead, don't bring that knucklehead back, fine. But I'm in a situation where I can contribute, and if it's helpful, then on bended knee, I say, give me direction. If it's not helpful, send me about my way, because I got a good thing going.
Well, thank you for even considering this, and thank you for coming in and even having the conversation with us. You know, obviously with the executive staff and the folks that we have today, not that they can't do the job, but again, there's a lot of job that still needs to be done. And so the additional resources, the additional leadership that we can provide and augment the team in this kind of phase that we're in, I think it's one of those that we have to do. And so, do we spend 3-6 months to find an interim superintendent until we find the superintendent to follow for the next
Well, the
6
problem
months?
is if you go out and try to find another person, they're gonna have to learn the system in the school district, and that's gonna take a long time, and then they'll be done, so.
Well,
Yep.
the other thing is, I mean, in 1 month, you can start the superintendent search process right now. I mean, an acting superintendent doesn't sit in place very long, and you can start the superintendent search because the assumption is the pool of superintendents have been very low. So planning
Yep.
on 2 rounds,
Yep.
starting it sooner
Yep.
rather than later. And if you get somebody in place, they, just because they're in someplace right now, if you put the start date on 7/1, they can plan and give their district heads up and whatever else. So, and then we also have to be talking about getting an appointment done and stuff,
Oh, I would
filling
want
Bree's seat. And so there's a lot that's going on with all of that right now. And I think we have to, and there's a lot of team building that has to be done with this board. This board doesn't operate as a team, and it needs to figure out how to operate as a team and get back to having discussions on children. We don't have discussions on how our decisions impact the classroom or impact the kids. And so we need to get back to that. And again, partnering with the superintendent and the cabinet members instead of picking sides.
I have to, I mean, I don't know what is happening right now. I feel like we are not a perfect board. I don't feel like, I think about kids all the time.
I get
and
that, but the discussion isn't at
I'm
the
just-
table.
I'm just saying that we do make a lot of decisions that impact children, and I do feel like we've made a lot of progress if you go back to when we first started, even before we started, just the style of communication, how the temperature of meetings, it, for me, has cooled quite a bit, and I know we have very much opportunity to grow, but I also don't think, criticizing the board right now in this moment is not helping us make a decision together.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that we need to also work on ourselves.
I'm not saying we
And-
don't.
And
Like
so,
myself.
and I think that is important for us to continue to do, and making sure that we're continuing to build that. And I know that we're all thinking about kids, but we need to have that discussion and conversation at the table when we're making decisions on the long-term impact to the classroom and to the student.
I just don't think it doesn't
The
happen.
superintendent needs to help drive that.
So any new superintendent, any new permanent superintendent is going to be hired with new board members. And so this existing board will not be voting for any new permanent superintendent, period. Okay?
Right.
So, go ahead, sorry, you were finishing.
No, I don't think there is a lot of criticism coming out right now in terms of saying we're not a team and we're not doing things. I think we have made, our last vote in terms of, when we look at things like the upcoming levy, it was very important for us to be unanimous in that vote. We were unanimous in that vote. So I feel like we are making those decisions that directly impact kids, and I don't think this is time to kind of, I'm not sure what's happening. I guess I just feel like we're.
I agree with you.
I consider
don't-
you a team member, right?
I think the conversation,
It's sidetracked.
even from the get-go, has been about kids. That's why the budget cuts were so hard, because we knew how it was going to impact kids. And we're trying to make the right decision that gets things, back in place as far as like our financials, but also is having the least impact on the students in the classroom. I think the discussion is always around kids. I think we need to get over our personal issues that we have with each other. I don't think there's division. I don't think anybody's picking sides. I'm not picking sides. I'm just trying to do what's best for kids and what's best for the district, which is why I brought someone forward, because I'm concerned about not having someone to help balance what we have going on this year for our kids. The READ Act, the levy, a possible bond, all of these different things that we have going. We need leadership in place, and we need someone to help that load with our assistant superintendent, because the last thing I want is another person leaving the district.
So, since the intent of this conversation or this meeting was to interview Michael Bowman, I would like to ask a little bit more about your change management philosophy. I know that we've got a lot of big changes that are coming up and big things that need to be done. Like, how do you define it? What would you do? Obviously, with the years of experience that you have in the military, and it sounds like a couple, because I don't know you super well. so you tell me, what's your story, what's your jam, what's change management to you?
Well, the essence of change management resides in communication. And whether that's vertical, horizontal, however you want to shape that. The most important thing is to have a process, and then to identify with clarity what the problem is, because a lot of times people have a difficulty defining the problem, and they start solving symptoms. But with change, information input. So if change is top down, your opportunities for success are pretty low. This is my experience in learning. Change should be bottom up, and processes should be shaped to do that. But as change is being contemplated, there's a lot of different stakeholders, and in a public education system, it's not a direct line. I mean, you can't always draw those things clearly. It's more like an atom, right? You got a nucleus and you got electrons, positive charge, negative charge, and they're flowing around, and you're trying to work through that. So the runways for change have to be longer. If it's corporate, which I've been spending some time there, decisions are really pretty fast. And I would say the caring part, the compassionate part of that with people is a lot lower. Just my experience. You know, in the military, it's top down a lot, and it's not. It's very endemic. There's a whole education process that leaders go through, and they all get the same leadership training, however that is. In public education, you got none of that going on. So you have to have longer runways. You have to be more strategic on the front end before you get into all the tactical nuances of that. I think the less change you can be putting on people, the better. You know, a little more, let's do the things we have and do them well, instead of always trying to do the next thing and chasing this next shiny object. And I think, you know, if you're an interim, that's probably what you got to focus on, as opposed to some dynamic change management process. The other thing is there's a lot of the communication that superintendents have to have with the leaders is intense, constant, and relentless. And that's, I think, how you are better able to affect change in an organization. But change will come. You can't avoid it. I mean, if you try to say, oh, it's going to be flat and status quo, and no, it's going to come. I mean, look how this district had to react to, I was hoping never to say this word again, COVID. But if you think about it, on scale, and look at that as maybe a case study of change, change was thrust upon everybody. The Department of Education took a lot of control, and districts had to react and literally change an entire operational system on the fly. And that's going to cause a whole lot
Many
of
times.
Right, and then there's several times, and
Yeah.
then there's a lot of political piece to that too that's going to enter into the conversation, or the distress that everybody was having. And this district did that well. They did it well because there was a lot of communication. Now, was it the best that ever could possibly be? Nope.
And was everybody happy?
Yeah, no,
Nope.
nobody, few are going to be happy in that scenario. But my point is, in talking about change and reacting, there's a reaction that you want to get out of. You want to be proactive, and to me that's runways. And by runways, I mean, if you have a planning process that you think is 6 months, you better be looking at it at 9 to 12 months and extend that out. And that's to get that stakeholder input, that stakeholder, Judy talked about a little bit of
Ownership.
You want to hear, actually you probably want to hear more from your critics than anybody else, so that you can either confirm or deny that what you're doing is sensical and helpful and progressive in the manner in which it needs to be. So I don't know, I can't lay out I could draw you a process if you want to sit down and go through that, but my concern is, I know you have a very strong business background, and the applications, there are things that can apply across, and there are things that I just don't think would ever work that way, and that's kind of been bolstered by the work I've been doing in the private sector away from public education. So, one of my life goals was to get involved in the private sector because I spent time in the military, then I came into public education, and hey, let's go to private sector and just round out this old man's life experience. So that's what I've been focused on. And change management processes in business are I won't say super linear, but more linear than they are in public education because the constituencies are different. And in public education, the constituencies are far broader.
You know, I think too, you bring up a good example with change management with all the COVID stuff that we had to deal with, and then we did the community survey. The majority of the community felt that we handled COVID well, and I think that's one of the things that we have to lean on more as a board in a district is what our community overall is saying, because I think we get locked in too much into social media and what's being said on that, and I've said this before, like what's in our little bubble, but when we look at decisions we make, if the majority of the community is liking the decisions, we're doing the right thing, even though we maybe got 100 emails about it. Those are just 100 emails. When you look at the number of kids we're representing, the number of families we're representing, 100 emails, sometimes from the same people over and over again, is input to consider, but not to be driving decisions and stuff. So I think with the change management piece, some of the things that we've dealt with in your first couple of years, is, we're gonna hear some negative feedback on the responses and what we did, but that doesn't mean the process was wrong or bad. And so I think, Michael, you hit it right on the head, is the corporate world, no matter how much you try to wedge it, the school district processes into the corporate world, the way we're funded and the way everything operates just doesn't align.
Well, it's not a direct overlay, but there are some things that are done in the private sector that you frankly
could
could
Yep.
do in public education and probably should do.
Yep.
And learn and benefit from that, certainly, without question. And I think public education lags a little bit in that. Some of it has to do with technology and information management systems and not having the developmental dollars aside. Like, I can tell you almost every company I work with has a little budget over here on the side where they're doing development.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not, it's not resident because there's no category for that
Yep.
unless you carve it out of the general fund.
Yep.
And with the cross-subsidy scenarios that we're dealing with special education, and that challenge, that exacerbates every single dollar you have in the district. And that's, you don't want to pit special education against general education. That's lunacy, frankly.
Yeah.
And but you have to live with that. And you can't have super deep conversations with the general public on that matter, because I can tell you, Mr. Thompson or Director Thompson, there are budget pressures in any entity and organization, but public education is a special situation, for sure. The drivers on revenue are just not the same, and the cycles are just not the same, and it's unfortunate. That doesn't mean you can't plan for, using a suite of planning assumptions, to project out 5 years, and you've got to get in a constant iteration of refinement, right? And, I could talk about that and.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Sure.
So, Michael, we had a great conversation about financials of the district and just looking at some of the things that we went through as a district. And one of the things you did a really nice job of explaining to me was where the finances were when you retired. And
Well, you
then-
can go look at the record.
Yeah, and then how that 7 million, like how you explained that budget deficit that happened there. So if you don't mind, like taking a moment to explain
Well,
that.
Bill,
'cause-
I think Bill did explain that in the video. What he didn't, what I would have probably preferred was like some numbers instead of pretty Bill talking. And I love Bill, but, you know, show me the numbers, and where were the decision points? So at the end of COVID, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I recall, and I think we were in this room, where we were responding to COVID, and we were going to expand the online school, and we needed, I want to say 2.5 million was the number that sticks in my head. I could be a little off on that.
I think that's right.
And then the DPs coming out of that, decision points coming out of that had to be, or checkpoints had to be the legislative actions that were taking place, and when do you stand that back down? Because if the legislature wasn't going to make you whole, you just spent 2.5 million, and if you didn't back that out, you didn't, like, I don't mean to sound pejorative, but you had to shut that down. And the DPs, your decision points on that had to be backwards planned so that you could say, okay, we're here in X time, we don't have an answer from the legislature, we're sitting here looking at a potential shortfall, we got to
We were
start.
already talking about doing a levy referendum as well that we didn't go forward doing because of COVID.
That's correct.
So we had a levy referendum discussion that never got to go forward.
Correct. And I know that the conversations with regard to the state at the time was, we're going to make districts whole.
Yep. And so then when
yeah.
none of that happened and the levy didn't happen, then when we got to that next budget, cuts were necessary.
Yeah, but I think, again, I think there were some things that we had, I can just speak for what I know.
Yep.
And what was in place were at the administrative level, not at the board level. There were checks we had along the way that needed to be hit. And if you didn't hit them, there were, a DP is a decision point along a continuum of whatever action it is.
Right.
And with finance, we know what the cycle is. We know what the legislature, and I don't know what the legislature did this last time with regard, did they go over session?
No.
No.
So they had made their budget decisions, and so the planning assumptions could turn into actuals that you could then, you just have to stay in front of those, and you gotta watch them. And if you let them pass, you're gonna do a budget calculation that's gonna put you in that spot, in that case, in that scenario. Now, I do think, if memory serves, that the legislature gave districts some special education
We
money.
had 6 million.
Some.
Okay, and the shortfall was how much?
Well,
For
we had
14.
15.4, so the shortfall was 9 million.
No, I'm talking about the
Oh.
budget, I'm sorry, the budget cut was what?
Oh, 7. Yeah.
So there's another point of categorical aid from the state. You gotta be watching it. You gotta be careful with it. And by that I mean you have to make your planning assumptions, and then you gotta watch what happens and make your refinements, and they have to happen in stride as you're moving
And
toward.
we haven't always accepted them.
That's correct. I've been on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, I know.
And it's fine. I mean, it should be. It should be. But you know, in the end of the day, as you budget and budget forecast, that's another thing that has to be communicated on a consistent and constant basis. Whether that's administration to the board and what the board wants to, you know, put out publicly, whether you find a way to dashboard that stuff. I mean, that's another, that's where I think business does have a pretty good system in place where, you know, you're just on an ongoing dashboard where you can kind of see your major muscle movements and watch that. But the unassigned fund balance is the key to success in the finance management world. If you can understand unassigned fund balance and you can master that, and everybody's watching it, it's really hard to go wrong. I mean, there's some tough decisions that have to be made
Right.
to sustain that fund balance,
Yep.
but I think everybody should know that, see that coming.
Yep.
And I think those are one of the things that we're trying to do this year, is to create that kind of dashboard and get some more transparency for our community members, whether we put it in the regular board meetings or not. I did get a chance to look at the June 2022, the budget that was approved, and at that time, the projection was that we had roughly almost $9 million in our savings account at that time. There was an end towards of getting to that 5.5% number. And so the board approved that in June of 2022. And then, like you said, if there isn't constant refinement and understanding the revenue that's coming in or lack of revenue coming in, how do you course correct that? And so whether the new the superintendent that was there at that time, the course correction maybe wasn't as quickly, or maybe it was, but unfortunately, it resulted in a $1.5 million in our savings account at the end of 2023 school year. And
Well,
so-
I think too, if memory serves me, that the other thing that was happening, the economy took a nice nosedive.
Transportation costs, inflation,
Yep.
utility costs, all that stuff, kind of a perfect storm
Yep.
of. And I think the good news is that there was, $8-9 million in our savings account to weather that storm. And if we did not, then we would have probably had to make even more cuts in the year of 2023, in addition to cutting significantly more than the $7 million for the following year. But I do have another question if I can ask.
Sure, go
Wait,
for
is
it.
this I have a question as part of this. Is this a different question?
Oh, I do have a different question, but
Okay.
I'll pause here
Can I-
if you want to.
Wasn't there also, because there was excess in the general fund at one time, wasn't there also purposeful spend down that was complicated by, weren't there decisions made about spend down that were complicated by all the COVID stuff?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The 2.5 million was the
With
big one.
the- okay.
There were some other ones, but, the truth too is that the feds did give some money back into this Lakeville when I was still here. I know about those, but those were all categorical, and it wasn't much. So categorical means, I'm gonna give you this, and you can only drink it to here, and then you gotta give it back to me. We get a lot of funding that way, where it's, and I don't know if you know those terms or not, and
Sure.
sometimes
No,
I
that's fine.
speak in those terms, so you may know more about categorical funding than I'll ever know.
I'm
More than I'd
So I
like
didn't-
to.
But that's what, that's some of the challenge, because some of your fund balance problems, if you could move money, like in the business world,
Yeah.
because there's an art to that. If you can move money, you can ballast that scenario.
Michael, we got 10.4 million from the state. We barely get to use 4 million as we want. Everything else was restricted.
Well, there you go.
And most of the community did not know that. not
Well,
even
and so
close.
the reality is that you have to, I don't know, I think there's just ways to get more transparent about it, and maybe a dashboard is the answer. Maybe you put a dashboard up there. The challenge you definitely will have to consider about that is, what does it say and what do people understand about that? So you got to be really clear about it.
What does that mean?
Yep.
Sometimes it could do more harm than help because it seems.
I don't think anytime you show the public your financials, it's ever bad.
No, it's always a good thing, but it has to come.
Now,
with
it
a
might
lot
be
of-
painful.
It has to come with a lot of asterisks.
Well, it's
Which
something
we did
that,
earlier.
even with onboarding and doing all that, it takes a long time to understand how all these funds work, and, I mean, that's one thing that I think.
Yeah, and that's the
When you
trick.
give information, you have to do it in a way that is actually gonna be, the public can absorb in a way that is helpful, as opposed to drowning them in information that they don't understand.
Correct.
right?
A
And so-
layperson's type of.
Right,
Yeah.
because.
Well, that's why I say major muscle movements. I think most people I'll just say in Lakeville, because I talk to people in Lakeville, they could understand it. I don't think that would be hard. But there is some nuance that's for sure.
Well, that's why there's 2 days of required finance training by new board members, so, I mean, it's not just by accident.
Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of time in it, and I'm still learning, so. Apparently I failed one class.
Go ahead.
So I apologize for if this is too personal, but I did hear that you said the military. So just out of curiosity, thanks for your service, but like, what did you do? And you said that a couple times, so I was just curious. What did you do? I don't know.
It's took a long time.
He wrote a book about it.
He did, yeah, read his book,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Let's see. What did I do in the military? Well,
Lieutenant
I was
Colonel Ballman.
I was an airborne ranger with a knuckle dragon, knuckle-headed approach to life. No, I spent 20 years on active duty. I enlisted in the Army out of high school. Then I went into, for all the veterans out there who might listen to this, I drank the Kool-Aid, became an officer, or OSIFer, whichever one you want to use, and spent 20 years then in the Army. I retired as a lieutenant colonel after a privileged opportunity to command a battalion fighting on the west side of Baghdad. And I had a son who I hadn't seen much of as a little boy, and decided that rather than go on to the next one and the next one and the next one, that I would retire. Very, very difficult decision in my life. I loved the Army. I loved everything about it. I grew up in it. I was an Army brat. I've moved and lived all around the world. I'm originally from Minnesota, though.
Mhm.
Olivia, Minnesota. And I went to Bloomington Jefferson, let's see, 1978, so I'm dating myself. We moved back to Minnesota from a place in Japan. And I went to high school, 9th and 10th grade in Japan. And then here, Bloomington Jefferson, Jaguar, class of 80. That's what I did with the military. And yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a ton. But I learned a ton also working in education. Maybe soften the edges a little bit. Because one of the things that I'll say about Lakeville, I was in St. Paul for about 10 years, I think, St. Paul Public School System. Learned a ton there, big operation. But Lakeville, we have the best teachers, I think, in the country, in our community. And we have our principals, they're just amazing people. And the staff here, when I came here, Lisa was the superintendent, Dr. Snyder. I was on a team with Renee and Emily and Tony, and they were like brothers and sisters to me. I mean, literally. And I know the difference. I know the difference, and I appreciated them because they cared so much about this work, and they cared a lot about this school district. They cared. I think everybody was universally focused on trying to help kids and families, even at their own detriment. I witnessed that. So it was awesome. And the community out here, whether it's Lions or Rotary or trying to think of some, all the folks down there, QA1, the BTD, everybody down there off of 70, the chamber, the faith community, just flipping great.
And they all work together to make this a place to raise kids.
They were very supportive
Yep.
of the school district,
Yep.
working with the city staff,
Yep.
Justin and,
Tom Terry.
love Tom. Doug was the mayor most of the time while I was here. Just fabulous people who care about the school district, and they're amazing. Now, Chief, I think the chief police
Was
changed.
Long,
so-
and now it's
Yeah,
Paul.
so I worked with
Yep.
Chief Long and his lieutenants pretty closely. Fabulous people. I'm not sure, I don't think I've met the gentleman that's the chief now, but, that would just be an introduction. And I don't drink, so it wouldn't be a beer. But I'm just,
We won't know that.
I know I went a little off there, but my point, I guess bringing it back is, there's parallels that I have between the time I was in the military and working in, for sure, in Lakeville. It's a really amazing place, and you know, our coaches, the people that are out there coaching our kids, and I'm not just talking sports, I mean drama, speech, you know, our choirs, I mean, and fuego.
Right.
For you who don't know what that means, it's on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it's just, you sit at the Christmas thing over there at Porterhouse. I don't know if they still do that.
Yeah,
and
they do.
It's so, you want to cry. You want to cry. It's just so peaceful and wonderful. And yeah, I don't know what else I can say. This is a great community. It's a great school district. And
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I
Sure.
ask it? So we have some big changes coming this year with just the counselors being added to the high school, as well as middle school counselor, as well as the levy that has hopes to bring in more. So just wondering your thoughts about that, kind of coming into some change there.
Well, I can only give you generalized because I really don't know the details. Devil's always in the details. Are you asking me about the levy or about doing a levy now, or I'm not sure exactly
Well,
what the question. What do I
yeah.
think about mental health and social support? Well, is that a fair way to state it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly care about someone who's going to, like I said, champion our levy that we're going after. And part of that is rounding out the counseling and really even getting to 4 counselors is probably, we probably want to aim higher there. So trying to help build that system.
Well, I can't speak to the detail at this point in time. I would just say that I know that the mental health challenges that we face in our community, and I'll just stay local and immediate, are significant. I'm not, when you talk about county and social support and city and then the school districts, I think the school systems have been handed a very difficult situation, both financially, or I'll call it resourcing. Our resourcing is just not, it's not at the right level. But the challenge, the bigger challenge is, so what's your core function? What's your core mission? To educate the kids and do so in a safe environment. And so when you start getting into mental health and social issues that are attendant to that, you know, a child, and I can speak to this in great depth from being in an urban environment, if a student comes to the classroom and has all these other things going on, the learning isn't going to happen. And we're asking our teachers to deal with a lot of that.
And they need the support as well.
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
I live with one.
Mhm.
At least unless she's leaving now.
You better break this news to her carefully.
No, she's in charge.
I know.
My point, so I do think that mental health and social supports are they're very, very important to the core mission of teaching and learning. But the core mission of teaching and learning, and when you're resource constrained, you have to have prioritization in order to execute. And so I think that if those are in alignment, then I can be supportive. When they're not in alignment, then I would have to find a better or a different way to do that. But limited resources and how those get used is generally where all the arguments start and end. And you have to prioritize and execute at some point. You have to make a decision, prioritize, execute. So I don't know on this levy. I would have to dig into it and look at it more in its detail. I do know it's out there, but I don't know the details of what the allocation expectations are with regard to those dollars.
Yeah, I think.
And I don't know where I would say that if we haven't defined it in dollars and cents, we would want to prioritize that. and communicate that to the public clearly as fast as possible, if it's not already out there.
I think something that as a board, we've been trying to hear is, I mean, obviously with our last round of negotiations, those are very difficult, but the culture, there's been a shift in terms of how our teachers feel in the classroom. And like you're saying, so much of that feels like the stress of there's just something that has changed with behaviors and things and mental health.
It's called
and things
COVID.
that- And
It's the second and third order effects of decisions that were made about taking kids out of school and all those things. And I'm not, we're way past the judgment of all of that. We're in the how do we recover from that and what's different that needs to be addressed that maybe in 2018 we would have never considered, like it wouldn't have been on our minds. But things have changed. For sure they've changed.
Well, and I do think that a lot of these things were going on before COVID. It just took basically this pandemic to exacerbate everything and put a lens on it in a way that was very different.
I would agree with you.
And in terms of inequities, it highlighted all of those kinds of things. And so I do think there was already an undercurrent of that.
For sure.
So a lot of the levy is really trying to, for my mind, hear our educators in terms of, if we can't make the salaries be exactly what they would like, and we would all like to give our teachers way more money than we pay them, but can we create a culture that is more supportive to them, that gives them what they need as resources in the classroom to lessen some of these extras?
Or even a mentorship program.
Well, and
how
then
that affects kids too.
giving,
So, like,
giving
how-
the kids someone
Right.
to speak to, because these long-term effects of what happened for students, like we're still feeling them. I sat in a meeting today with a kid, and I'm talking about like all of the things that had impacted this child, and the mom was like, yeah, well, we had COVID during kindergarten, and like it's just, so that's our
Yep.
key early childhood years when that was at some missed points there. So I mean, just the impact was heavy,
Right.
very much so.
So hopefully, these are things that we've been talking about would have that positive direct effect on the classroom environment, which, like you're saying, if you have that environment that isn't right for kids, the learning stops. The learning isn't what you need it to be.
Well, it's
and
not
that's
only the learning for that student, it's whatever the behaviors are that are going to impact collaterally
Right.
within that classroom
Right.
and stress out the teacher.
Right. So that's the goal.
Brian?
Yep, so this is my last question, and I'll defer to others who want to ask. With my short term being on the board, I've had a very one-sided experience of what it's like to work with a superintendent and as a board. And so I'd love to get kind of your definition, your interpretation, and like how does a superintendent work with a board? What are they supposed to do? How do they work with them? What do you expect out of the board and so forth? It's a very open-ended, there is no right or wrong. I think
That's
when
pretty loaded, Brian.
It's pretty loaded, but you know what? I don't know. All I know is the one experience that I've had with the existing the experience that I've had, and love to get a different perspective if there is one.
I said it at the beginning, and I'll just repeat it. It's a relationship thing, and it's a communication thing, and it starts with respect. You are taking on a huge task. Running a campaign, getting elected to a board, tip of the hat to each and every one of you for that. I don't look at it any differently than, well, there's 6 bosses sitting here, so I have to be responsive to you all. Now, I've worked with Judy, I've worked with David, I've worked with Terry. Ask them. They're going to tell you the truth. My belief, my understanding is, if they reach out, I have dialogue with them and try to work as a, what's the official thing? A superintendent's a adjunct member, or what is that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
ex officio.
yeah.
Ex officio,
Now,
right,
ex
I almost
officio.
made officer. Ex officio, okay, but I just tried to be on the team. To me, team is everything. Without it, you're just going to be in a world of hurt, so to speak. Got to get out of the hurt locker and be on a team. Be a team member. And be candid, be a team member. I think I did that. And again, Mr. Thompson, I'd say probably talk to them. They're going to give you whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. But I made a point of it to be as communicative and as relational as I could be and stay professional, because I'm probably not going to go out and drink beer and get drunk with you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the board? Dave?
Statement, Emily requested a meeting last Friday with Kim and I to discuss many issues, and just so everybody knows, she was in support of Michael becoming the interim superintendent. That's all I want to say.
Any other questions? All right. Given the current weather situation and to get Michael off the hot seat there.
It's called the Budweiser hot seat. Can I just say, I didn't feel like I was in a hot seat at all.
Okay.
And I would also just like to say, I respect whatever you all choose to do. If I can help, I'm standing up and saying I'm willing to help. If I'm going to be some sort of some negativity on top of negativity, I'm the last guy you want to be talking to. So I live in this community. I love this school district, and that's why I sit here. My name is misspelled up
I was
there.
gonna say,
Yeah.
there's another N.
And the only reason I'm pointing it out was it's just proof that when you go, you're gone. Right? And I am so okay with that. All right, I am okay with that. But if I can be any kind of helpful force, then I want to do that. If I'm a disruptive force, then that's fine too. Because, like I said, I live in Lakeville. I love Lakeville. Not leaving Lakeville. That was on the table for a while with my wife and I, but we've made a really concrete decision about staying here. And so if you see some construction around my house, it's her fault.
Don't point at me, you meant her.
You told me about honeydews.
Oh, yeah, so it is my fault.
It is your fault.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
We just want to thank you so much for coming in and for accepting the opportunity to come in and talk to us. It means a lot to us as a board, and just hearing your servant leadership style and your answers to your questions. I love Lakeville too, and that was one of the reasons that I ran to be on school board, was that I owe everything with my kids to this district and these teachers that have kind of helped bring them into the young individuals that they're growing into. So I share that level of Lakeville with you, and again, like I said, thank you so much for coming in, and we'll keep in contact as this process unfolds, and kind of see where it takes us. So like I said, I want to get everybody home safe. With the impending weather, Terry was sharing his phone alerts
got
with me.
going on?
Actually, it's going to start right now.
It's going to start right now. All right,
It's
so
gonna end at 7:45.
Or the hail comes.
having discussed everything, I would say this meeting is officially adjourned. So thank you.
Thank you.
You need a second or anything like that? It's good.
No, because it's a working